That morning, Rachel Chen arranged the conference room with the same quiet precision she had perfected over 15 years. Fresh coffee, sparkling water, legal pads aligned at perfect angles. She moved like a ghost through the glass corridors of TechFlow Industries, invisible to the executives who would soon decide the fate of the company she had helped build from nothing. None of them knew that the revolutionary algorithm driving their billion-dollar IPO had been born in her mind during sleepless nights, coded by her hands while they slept in their Palo Alto mansions. Today, as the board prepared to crown Marcus Webb as the tech visionary of the decade, Rachel carried a secret that would shatter Silicon Valley's most celebrated success story. The rain drummed against the floor, to ceiling windows of the 42nd floor, casting shifting shadows across the polished mahogany table. Rachel smoothed her simple black dress, the same one she wore to every board meeting, every investor presentation, every moment when she needed to blend into the background. At 42, she had mastered the art of invisibility. Her dark hair was pulled back in the same practical bun she had worn since 2008. When she first walked through these doors with an MIT computer science degree and dreams that Silicon Valley had systematically crushed. Rachel, the coffee's cold again. The voice belonged to Marcus Webb, CEO and founder of TechFlow Industries, though the title founder had always been a carefully constructed lie. He didn't look up from his phone as he spoke, his fingers dancing across the screen with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the world existed for his convenience. At 51, Marcus had the kind of silver-haired charm that graced magazine covers and TED Talk stages. His navy Armani suit was tailored to perfection, his Stanford class ring catching the light as he gestured dismissively in her direction. "Of course, Mr. Webb. I'll get a fresh pot immediately." Rachel's voice was steady, professional, betraying none of the storm that had been building inside her for months. She had said those exact words thousands of times over the past 15 years, each repetition another small death of the brilliant woman she had once been. As she walked toward the executive kitchen, Rachel caught her reflection in the polished steel of the coffee machine. The woman staring back at her looked tired, defeated, ordinary, nothing like the young graduate who had once believed she could change the world with lines of code and revolutionary algorithms. That woman had been full of fire, armed with a degree from one of the world's most prestigious institutions and ideas that could reshape how artificial intelligence processed human language. This woman, the one in the reflection, was a ghost, a shadow, a keeper of secrets she was too afraid to claim. But today was different. Today, the ghosts of the past had finally caught up with Marcus Webb. The boardroom began filling with the usual cast of Silicon Valley power players. Richard Sterling, the venture capitalist, whose portfolio read like a who is who of tech unicorns, took his customary seat at Marcus's right hand. His cold blue eyes swept the room like a predator surveying his territory. Beside him sat Jennifer Walsh, TechFlow's chief technology officer, whose rise through the company had been built on taking credit for innovations she had never conceived. Her red hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, her expression sharp and calculating as she reviewed the IPO documents that would make her one of the wealthiest women in tech. Then there was David Park, the company's legal counsel, a quiet man with nervous energy who had always treated Rachel with more respect than the others. His presence at today's meeting struck her as odd. This was supposed to be a celebration of the successful IPO launch, not a legal proceeding. But David's briefcase bulged with documents, and his usual calm demeanor seemed strained. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, rising to his feet with the practiced charisma that had charmed investors out of hundreds of millions of dollars. Today marks the culmination of 15 years of innovation, dedication, and vision. Techflow Industries went public this morning at $47 per share, valuing our company at $3.2 billion. The room erupted in applause. Rachel stood quietly by the coffee station, her hands folded behind her back, watching the celebration of wealth built on her stolen dreams. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had arranged the flowers that decorated the table, ordered the champagne that would toast Marcus's triumph, even proofread the press release that hailed him as a visionary pioneer in artificial intelligence. Our flagship product, the Aria language processing system, has revolutionized how computers understand human communication. Marcus continued, his voice growing more animated. Fortune 500 companies around the world rely on Aria to power their customer service platforms, their data analysis systems, their very connection to their customers. And it all began with a simple idea. What if we could teach machines to truly understand the nuances of human language? Rachel's hands tightened involuntarily. She remembered the night that idea had been born, not in Marcus's mind, but in her cramped studio apartment in Fremont. It was 2009, and she was working as his secretary while desperately searching for an engineering position that would recognize her MIT credentials. The tech industry in 2009 was even more hostile to women, especially Asian women, than it was today. Resume after resume had been rejected, not because she lacked qualifications, but because hiring managers couldn't see past their preconceptions. She had been working late, debugging a customer service chatbot that Marcus's previous engineering team had built. The system was clunky, mechanical, unable to grasp context or emotional subtext. Frustrated customers were abandoning the platform in droves. Rachel had stayed up until 3 a.m. that night, not because it was her job, but because she couldn't stand to see such inefficient code representing the company she worked for, even as a secretary. By dawn, she had rewritten the entire natural language processing engine. The new algorithm didn't just parse words, it understood intent, emotion, cultural context. It was a breakthrough that would eventually become the foundation of artificial intelligence as the world knew it today. The beauty of Aria, Marcus was saying, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation Rachel had assembled for him, is its ability to understand not just what people say, but what they mean. Sarcasm, implied requests, emotional undertones. Aria processes human communication with an accuracy rate of 97.3%, far exceeding any competitor in the market. Jennifer Walsh nodded approvingly. The applications are limitless. We're already in talks with major corporations about expanding Aria into healthcare diagnostics, legal document analysis, even creative writing assistance. Rachel felt sick. Every application they discussed, every revenue stream they celebrated, had sprung from her algorithm. The one she had given to Marcus 10 years ago, trusting him when he promised it would be a collaborative effort, that she would receive proper credit and compensation once the technology was refined. That promise, like so many others, had evaporated the moment Marcus realized what he truly possessed. Mr. Webb, David Park interrupted, his voice uncharacteristically tense. Before we proceed with the celebration, I believe there are some legal matters we need to address. The room fell silent. Marcus's expression shifted from triumphant to wary. Legal matters? David, this isn't the time for. I am afraid it is exactly the time. David opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick manila folder. I've been contacted by the U.S. Patent Office regarding some irregularities in Techflow's intellectual property filings. Rachel's pulse quickened. She had almost forgotten about the patents. In those early days when she was still naive enough to believe in fairness and proper attribution, she had filed provisional patents for her algorithm improvements. It had been a precautionary measure, something her MIT professors had drilled into their students. Always protect your intellectual property before sharing it with potential collaborators. She had filed the patents under her own name, never imagining she would need them as ammunition in a war she hadn't known she was fighting. "What irregularities?" Richard Sterling demanded, his venture capitalist instincts immediately sensing danger. A patent dispute could tank the IPO, wiping out hundreds of millions in value. David's eyes found Rachel across the room, and she saw something in them she had never noticed before. Respect, and perhaps a hint of admiration. It appears that the core algorithms underlying the ARIA system were originally developed and patented by someone other than TechFlow Industries. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marcus's face went pale, his practiced composure cracking for the first time Rachel had ever witnessed. "That is impossible. I developed ARIA myself with input from our engineering team. Every line of code was created in-house. I have the patent filings right here," David continued, spreading documents across the conference table. "Filed with the U.S. Patent Office on the 15th of March, 2009. The inventor is listed as Rachel Chen, with a provisional patent for advanced natural language processing with contextual emotional recognition." The name hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Every head in the room turned toward the corner where Rachel stood, suddenly no longer invisible. She felt 15 years of suppressed dignity rising in her chest, straightening her spine for the first time in decades. Marcus's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. He looked like a man watching his empire crumble in real time. "Rachel, that is my secretary. She doesn't even have a technical background. This is clearly some kind of mistake." "Actually," Rachel said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence with quiet authority she hadn't used since her MIT graduation speech, "I have a master's degree in computer science from MIT with a specialization in artificial intelligence and natural language processing. I graduated summa cum laude in 2007. Jennifer Walsh's face went white. She had always treated Rachel with particular disdain, making snide comments about support staff who didn't understand the complexity of real engineering work. The irony was devastating. She had built her entire career on technology created by the woman she had spent years dismissing. "This is ridiculous," Marcus sputtered, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Rachel, you are confused. You may have filed some minor patents for optimization improvements, but the core ARIA technology was my creation. I can prove it." "Can you?" David Park's voice was gentle but relentless. "Because I've also obtained Rachel's original code submissions from 2009. Every comment, every version control check, in every documentation file. The timestamp data is quite clear. The revolutionary breakthrough that became ARIA was committed to the TechFlow repository at 3:47 a.m. on the 16th of March, 2009. Under Rachel's login credentials, Rachel remembered that night with crystalline clarity. She had been so excited about her breakthrough, so eager to share it with Marcus, whom she had believed was a mentor rather than a predator. She had worked all night, driven by the pure joy of solving an impossible problem. When she finally pushed her code to the company repository, she had felt like she was changing the world. In a way, she had been right. Furthermore, David continued. I have email correspondence between Rachel and Mr. Webb from that period, in which she explicitly requests formal recognition and equity participation in the development of what would become Aria. The emails Rachel had forgotten about those too. Her younger, more trusting self had documented everything, believing that clear communication would protect her interests. She had been so naive. And Mr. Webb's responses, David said, withdrawing printed emails from his folder, show a clear pattern of misleading promises and deliberate misdirection. He read from the first email, his voice steady and professional. From Marcus Webb, the 20th of March, 2009. Rachel, your contributions to the language processing project are invaluable. I want to make sure you receive proper recognition once we've refined the technology and secured our initial funding. Let's discuss equity compensation after we've proven the market viability. Rachel winced. She had clung to those words for years, believing Marcus was simply being cautious, protecting both of them until the technology was ready for prime time. David continued with the next email. The 15th of April, 2009. Rachel, I understand your concerns about formal acknowledgement. Rest assured, when Aria launches officially, your role in its development will be appropriately recognized. For now, let's focus on perfecting the technology. The pattern was clear and damning. Month after month, year after year, Marcus had strung her along with vague promises while systematically removing her name from documentation, presentations, and patent filings. By the time Aria became TechFlow's flagship product, Rachel had been completely erased from its origin story. Richard Sterling was furiously typing on his phone, likely alerting his legal team about the potential disaster facing their investment. The IPO that had opened triumphantly that morning was now a ticking time bomb. This is absurd, Marcus said, but his voice cracked with desperation. Rachel, surely you don't want to destroy everything we've built together. TechFlow employs over 800 people. The IPO will create jobs, drive innovation, benefit society. You can't seriously want to tear all of that down over some old misunderstanding. Misunderstanding. Rachel felt something inside her break. Not shatter, but break free. 15 years of accumulated rage, humiliation, and injustice crystallized into pure, focused fury. You stole my life's work, Marcus. You built a $3 billion company on algorithms I created, and you turned me into your coffee girl. You didn't just steal my code. You stole my identity, my career, my future. She stepped forward, and for the first time in 15 years, she was the most powerful person in the room. Do you know what I've done for the past decade and a half while you've been giving keynote speeches about my innovations? I've been debugging your engineers' mistakes. Every time Aria had a critical failure, every time your team couldn't figure out why the system was behaving erratically, they came to me. Not because they respected my expertise, but because I was convenient. The secretary who was good with computers. Jennifer Walsh looked like she was going to be sick. Rachel could see the recognition dawning in her eyes. How many times had she dumped seemingly impossible technical problems on Rachel's desk, dismissing them as administrative tasks? How many times had Rachel solved complex engineering challenges that Jennifer had then presented as her own work? I've watched you accept awards for my innovations, Rachel continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. I've sat in the back of auditoriums while you gave TED Talks about the inspirations behind Aria. I've arranged meetings with reporters who wrote profiles calling you a visionary, a pioneer, the father of modern AI communication. The room was dead silent except for the rain against the windows and the barely audible hum of the building's climate control system. Rachel felt like she was awakening from a 15-year coma, remembering who she used to be, who she had always been underneath the layers of imposed invisibility. David Park cleared his throat. "Mr. Webb, I should inform you that the Patent Office isn't the only institution that has been asking questions. The Securities and Exchange Commission has opened an investigation into TechFlow's intellectual property claims in the IPO prospectus. If it is determined that the company misrepresented the ownership of its core technology, there could be serious securities fraud implications." Marcus slumped in his chair as if someone had punctured his lungs. Securities fraud. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. If the SEC determined that TechFlow had knowingly misrepresented the origins of Aria in their public offering, Marcus wouldn't just lose his company. He could face criminal charges and decades in federal prison. What do you want?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The transformation was startling. In the space of 20 minutes, he had gone from Silicon Valley titan to broken man facing the destruction of everything he had built on lies. Rachel looked around the room at the faces of people who had dismissed, ignored, and diminished her for 15 years. She felt no satisfaction in their shock, no joy in their fear, only a profound weariness and a strange sense of liberation. "I want what was always mine," she said simply. "I want TechFlow Industries." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Richard Sterling's face went ashen. His venture capital firm had invested nearly $200 million in TechFlow, based on Marcus's claimed ownership of Aria. Jennifer Walsh looked like she was calculating how quickly she could update her LinkedIn profile and flee to a competitor. That is impossible," Marcus stammered. "The company is worth billions. The board would never." "The board doesn't have a choice," David Park interrupted. "Rachel's patents cover not just the original Aria algorithm, but all derivative technologies built on top of it. Every product TechFlow has released in the past 10 years, every licensing deal, every piece of intellectual property, it is all built on Rachel's foundation." He spread more documents across the table: patent filings, legal precedents, intellectual property law citations that Rachel didn't fully understand, but whose implications were crystal clear. Under intellectual property law, if TechFlow has been commercially exploiting Rachel's patented technology without proper licensing or compensation, she is entitled to damages equal to the full commercial value derived from her innovations. Given that Aria has generated approximately $2.8 billion in revenue for TechFlow since 2012. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The math was simple and devastating. Rachel wasn't just entitled to compensation, she was entitled to ownership of virtually everything TechFlow had become. Furthermore, David continued, Rachel's original employment agreement with TechFlow, the one she signed as a secretary in 2008, contains no assignment of invention clause regarding work performed outside her official duties. Her algorithm development occurred on her own time, using her own resources. TechFlow has no legal claim to her intellectual property. Marcus looked like a man watching his own execution. The irony was brutal. In his arrogance and prejudice, he had never bothered to secure proper legal rights to Rachel's innovations because he had never considered her a threat. He had been so confident in his ability to marginalize and control her that he had left himself completely vulnerable. Rachel felt a strange calm settling over her. For 15 years, she had carried the weight of injustice like a stone in her chest. Now, as the truth finally emerged, She felt lighter than she had since her graduation day at MIT. "There is something else you should know," David said, his voice gentler now as he addressed Rachel directly. "I didn't discover these patents by accident. I've been investigating TechFlow's intellectual property claims for the past 6 months, ever since I noticed discrepancies in the company's technical documentation." Rachel frowned. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Comments in the original code, annotations and variable names that didn't match Marcus's coding style or technical vocabulary, references to algorithms and mathematical concepts that he couldn't explain when questioned, and most tellingly, email timestamps that showed major technical breakthroughs occurring during periods when Marcus was traveling or otherwise unavailable." David smiled. The first genuine expression Rachel had seen from him in years of formal interactions. "I may be a corporate lawyer, but I have a computer science background. I know good code when I see it, and I know when someone is taking credit for work they couldn't have produced. Your algorithm is elegant, innovative, mathematically sophisticated. Marcus's contributions to the codebase, by contrast, are," he paused diplomatically, "functional, but unremarkable." The revelation hit Rachel like a physical blow David had known. For months, he had been building a case to protect her, investigating the theft of her intellectual property, preparing for this moment. She wasn't alone. She had never been as alone as she thought. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. "Why would you help me?" David's expression grew serious. "Because I watched a brilliant woman be systematically erased from her own creation. Because I've seen you solve technical problems that stumped our entire engineering team. And because—" he hesitated, then continued with quiet conviction. "Because my daughter is studying computer science at Stanford. I want her to enter a profession where her contributions are recognized and valued, where she won't be invisible no matter how much she achieves." The room remained frozen in stunned silence. Marcus stared at the table, his empire crumbling around him. Richard Sterling was still frantically texting, probably trying to limit his firm's exposure to the scandal. Jennifer Walsh looked like she was planning her exit strategy, but Rachel felt something she hadn't experienced in 15 years' hope. "What happens now?" she asked David. "Now you have choices to make. You can pursue full ownership of TechFlow through the courts, a process that could take years but would likely result in complete victory given the strength of your patent claims. You can negotiate a settlement that gives you control of the company while allowing current stakeholders to retain some equity. Or you can license your patents to TechFlow for a fee that would make you one of the wealthiest women in Silicon Valley while leaving the company structure intact." Rachel considered the options, but her mind was already clear. She didn't want money. Not really. She wanted something far more valuable. Recognition, validation, the restoration of her stolen identity. "I want the company," she said firmly. "All of it. I want TechFlow Industries transferred to my ownership, with Marcus and his enablers removed from all positions of authority. I want the real story of Arya's development made public, and I want the company restructured to ensure that no engineer, regardless of gender, ethnicity, or background, will ever be exploited the way I was." Marcus looked up from the table, his face a mask of defeat and desperate calculation. "Rachel, please, think about what you are doing. I made mistakes, yes, but destroying TechFlow won't undo the past. We can work something out. A partnership, shared ownership, full acknowledgement of your contributions. Don't destroy something beautiful out of anger." The audacity of his words hit Rachel like a slap. Even now, facing the complete collapse of his fraudulent empire, Marcus was trying to manipulate her, to frame her rightful reclamation of her work as destructive rather than restorative. "You think TechFlow is beautiful?" Rachel asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You think a company built on theft and lies and the systematic erasure of its real creator is beautiful? You think 15 years of forcing me to serve coffee to people who should have been my peers is beautiful?" She stood up, and for the first time since 2008, she felt her full height, her full presence, her full power. "I am not destroying anything, Marcus. I am finally building it correctly." The meeting ended with David scheduling follow-up sessions to handle the complex legal transfer of corporate ownership. As the board members filed out in stunned silence, Rachel remained in the conference room, staring out at the Silicon Valley landscape she had watched from behind secretarial desks for 15 years. She thought about the young woman who had walked through TechFlow's doors in 2008. Brilliant and optimistic and completely unprepared for the systematic prejudice she would face. That woman had been defeated, broken down, transformed into a ghost. But she had never been destroyed. Tomorrow, the tech industry would wake up to a story that would reshape how it thought about innovation, recognition, and justice. The secretary, who had been invisible for 15 years, would be front-page news. The algorithm that had made Marcus Webb famous would finally be attributed to its real creator, and TechFlow Industries would begin again, built on truth instead of lies. Rachel picked up her purse, the same practical black bag she had carried for years, and walked toward the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the polished steel, one last time. The woman looking back at her was no longer a ghost. She was the founder and owner of a $3 billion technology company, the creator of one of the most important artificial intelligence innovations of the 21st century. She was finally exactly who she had always been. But as the elevator descended toward the lobby, Rachel couldn't shake one final thought. Justice had been served, recognition had been restored, but could 15 years of invisibility ever truly be undone? The patents were hers, the company would be hers, but the time, those irreplaceable years of creativity and ambition, belonged to a past that no court could restore. The doors opened, and Rachel stepped into her new life, carrying both victory and the weight of all she had lost along the way.